I never thought a piece of paper could ruin my entire morning. But there it was, taped to my cabin door like some kind of scarlet letter when I pulled up on that crisp October Saturday in 2025. The document was official-looking, stamped and signed, declaring that the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association had filed a lien against my property for unpaid dues totaling $8,000, plus interest and legal fees. The problem was, I had never been part of their HOA, never signed their covenants, and most importantly, they had just made the biggest mistake of their entitled lives. My name is Ethan Crawford, and I bought my cabin in the mountains outside of Boulder, Colorado, back in 2018. 7 full years before Cedar Ridge Development even broke ground on their fancy subdivision next door. My property sits on 12 acres of pristine pine forest with a small creek running through it, and beneath that land lies the aquifer that feeds the well. I drilled 20 feet from my back porch. That well produces crystal clear water at a rate of 15 gallons per minute, more than enough for one person living off the grid most of the year. What the Cedar Ridge HOA did not know, what their lawyers apparently failed to research, and what was about to become very relevant, was that when they built their 30-home development, the county denied their application for a new well due to geological surveys showing insufficient water table depth on their side of the property line. So the developers did what developers do. They approached me in 2022 with an offer to purchase water rights. I was living in Denver at the time, working as a civil engineer and only using the cabin on weekends. A lawyer named Richard Sullivan came to my office with a contract offering me $200,000 for an easement, allowing them to tap into my well system. I read through every page, consulted my own attorney, and eventually agreed on one condition that I insisted be written in ironclad language. The easement was a revocable license, not a permanent right, and could be terminated with 90 days written notice if they ever attempted to include my property in their HOA jurisdiction, bothered me with code enforcement, or interfered with my property rights in any way. Richard assured me that would never happen. My property was grandfathered in, completely separate, and they just needed the water. I had the contract reviewed 3 times. My attorney, Jennifer Blackstone, told me it was airtight. So I signed, took the money, paid off my cabin, upgraded my well pump to handle the increased demand, and installed a master shutoff valve in my basement that controlled the entire water supply to Cedar Ridge. The system fed into their pipes just past my property line, and from there it distributed to all 30 homes. I kept meticulous records of the water usage, which they paid me for quarterly at rates tied to the municipal water costs in Boulder County. Everything was fine for 3 years. I got my checks, they got their water, and I barely saw my neighbors except for the occasional wave when I drove past their entrance gate. Then about 6 months ago, I noticed the checks were coming late. First by a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. I sent polite emails to the HOA management company, a firm called Premier Community Solutions out of Denver. They responded with bland apologies about processing delays and accounting transitions. The money always showed up eventually, so I let it slide. I had recently quit my engineering job to do freelance consulting work, which meant I was spending more time at the cabin, finally living the life I had always wanted in the mountains. But this lien changed everything. I pulled the paper off my door, read it again to make sure I was not hallucinating, and felt my blood pressure rising with each word. According to the document, I had failed to pay HOA dues since January 2025, despite multiple notices. It listed my address correctly, but claimed I was Lot 31 of Cedar Ridge Development Phase 2. There was no phase 2. There were only 30 homes, and I was not one of them. Someone had either made a catastrophic clerical error or was trying to pull something. Given that my water payments were now 2 months overdue, and I was looking at a lien, I was leaning toward the latter. I walked into my cabin, set my groceries on the kitchen counter, and pulled out my laptop. The cell service was terrible up here, so I used my satellite internet to search for the HOA board members. The Cedar Ridge HOA website was one of those overdone community portals with stock photos of happy families and buzzwords like preserving property values and maintaining community standards. The current board president was listed as Karen Donnelly, a woman whose profile picture showed her in her late 40s with the kind of haircut that demanded to speak to managers everywhere. The vice president was Todd Henderson, the secretary was Linda Morrison, and the treasurer was a guy named Frank Patterson. I found a phone number for Karen Donnelly and dialed it on my satellite phone. It rang 4 times before a voice answered that matched exactly what I expected. "This is Karen." "Miss Donnelly, this is Ethan Crawford. I own the property adjacent to Cedar Ridge, and I found a lien notice on my door this morning. There has been a very serious mistake." "Mr. Crawford, yes, I am glad you called. We have been trying to reach you for months about your outstanding dues. This lien was filed as a last resort after you ignored all our previous communications." My jaw clenched. "I have never received any communications from your HOA because I am not part of your HOA. I own my property independently, purchased it in 2018, and your development was built afterward. You have no authority over my land." There was a pause. Then Karen spoke in that condescending tone that immediately made me understand why people write entire Reddit threads about HOA nightmares. "Mr. Crawford, I think there is some confusion on your part. When Cedar Ridge expanded to include the surrounding properties for better community cohesion, all adjacent landowners were automatically enrolled. You should have received the updated covenants in the mail last November." "I received nothing because you cannot automatically enroll someone into an HOA. That is not how property law works. I have a separate deed, separate title, and an explicit contract with your development that prohibits exactly what you are trying to do." "Sir, I am looking at our records right now, and you are listed as Lot 31. If you have concerns about the dues amount, we can set up a payment plan, but the lien will remain until the balance is settled." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Karen, I need you to listen very carefully. I am not Lot 31. There is no Lot 31. You have 30 homes. I own the property with the well that supplies water to every single house in your development. I have a contract that allows me to terminate that water supply with 90 days' notice if you interfere with my property rights. Filing a fraudulent lien counts as interference." The silence on the other end lasted longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge to it. "Are you threatening to shut off our water over a billing dispute?" "I am explaining the legal reality of the situation. You need to remove this lien immediately and send me written confirmation that you understand my property is not part of Cedar Ridge HOA. Then we can continue our existing water agreement without issues." "Mr. Crawford, I will have to discuss this with the board and our attorney. But I should tell you that making threats about essential utilities could be considered coercion, and we have every right to defend our community. It is not a threat. It is a statement of my contractual rights. Remove the lien, Karen. I will bring this to the board meeting on Tuesday evening. We meet at 7 at the community center. You are welcome to attend and present your concerns through the proper channels." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process the absolute audacity. They had filed a lien against my property, were demanding money I did not owe, and now I had to go plead my case at their board meeting like some kind of supplicant. I pulled up the water agreement on my computer and reread the termination clause. It was crystal clear. 90 days written notice for any interference with my property rights, and I could shut off their water. The lien was definitely interference, but I am not an impulsive person. 7 years as a civil engineer taught me that proper documentation and following procedures saves you from lawsuits later. So instead of immediately sending a termination notice, I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon gathering every piece of relevant paperwork. I made copies of my original deed from 2018, the title insurance policy, the survey showing my property boundaries, the water rights agreement with all its amendments, and my payment history showing I had been paid for water usage until 2 months ago. I also printed out the Colorado state statutes regarding HOA formation and the legal requirements for including existing properties, which basically said you cannot do it without the owner's written consent. Sunday, I drove into Boulder and met with Jennifer Blackstone at a coffee shop. She was semi-retired now, but still did consulting work for a few longtime clients. I showed her everything, including the Lien notice. She looked it over and shook her head. This is either incompetence or fraud. My guess is someone on their board saw your property, assumed it was part of their development because it is adjacent, and added you to the rolls without doing basic due diligence. The question is whether they will admit the mistake quickly or dig in and make this expensive for everyone. What do you think I should do? Go to the meeting. Bring all this documentation. Record it if Colorado is a one-party consent state, which it is. Be calm and professional. Give them one clear chance to fix this. If they refuse, we send a formal demand letter and file a complaint with the county. If they still refuse, you can absolutely invoke your termination clause on the water agreement. That is a valid contract, and they are materially breaching your understanding by trying to assert HOA authority over you. How long would a lawsuit take if it comes to that? Months, maybe a year. But honestly, once you send notice that you are terminating their water supply, reality will set in pretty quickly. No water means uninhabitable homes. Their insurance will get involved, property values will tank, and suddenly their board will be facing a revolt from every homeowner whose morning shower depends on your goodwill. I thanked her and paid for her time. She refused at first, but I insisted. Good advice is worth paying for. I spent the rest of Sunday rehearsing what I would say, trying to keep it factual and unemotional. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I like my quiet life in the mountains, my consulting work, my books, and my solitude. But I am also not going to let some power-tripping HOA board steamroll me, because they cannot be bothered to check basic property records. Tuesday evening arrived with a cold wind blowing down from the peaks. I dressed in business casual, slacks and a button-down shirt, and loaded all my documents into a leather portfolio. The Cedar Ridge Community Center was a modern building near the front entrance of their development, with big windows and that generic upscale suburban architecture that could be anywhere in America. I arrived at 10 minutes before 7 and found about 15 people already seated in folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Karen Donnelly was immediately recognizable, sitting in the center position with a gavel in front of her like she was presiding over Congress instead of a small HOA meeting. Todd Henderson sat to her right, a balding man in his 50s who looked uncomfortable. Linda Morrison was a thin woman with glasses who kept shuffling papers nervously. Frank Patterson, the treasurer, was younger than the others, maybe late 30s, and was typing on a laptop. I took a seat in the back row and pulled out my phone to start recording. Several homeowners turned to look at me, probably wondering who the stranger was. Karen noticed me but did not acknowledge me until she banged the gavel at exactly 7. Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association Board to order. We have several items on the agenda tonight, including landscaping bids for the common areas, a discussion about holiday decoration guidelines, and a request to speak from a property owner regarding a lien matter. First, let us approve the minutes from last month. She droned through the procedural items while I waited. The landscaping discussion took 20 minutes and involved way too much debate about whether to plant ornamental grasses or native wildflowers. The holiday decoration guidelines were apparently controversial because someone wanted to restrict inflatable lawn decorations, and another person thought that was un-American. Finally, after nearly 45 minutes, Karen looked directly at me. We have a guest tonight, Mr. Ethan Crawford, who has requested time to address the board regarding a lien filed against his property. Mr. Crawford, you have 5 minutes. I stood up and walked to the front, setting my portfolio on the table. Thank you. I will try to be brief because this should be straightforward. 10 days ago, I found a lien notice on my property demanding $8,000 in HOA dues. The problem is, I am not a member of this HOA and never have been. I purchased my property in 2018, before Cedar Ridge existed. I have never signed your covenants, never agreed to your rules, and under Colorado law, you cannot unilaterally add existing properties to an HOA without the owner's explicit written consent. Karen interrupted. Mr. Crawford, as I explained on the phone, our records show you as Lot 31 in Phase 2 of our development. There is no Phase 2. You have 30 homes, Lots 1 through 30. I own the adjacent parcel on 12 acres that predates your development by 4 years. Here is my deed, recorded in Boulder County in June 2018. Here is your development's first deed, recorded in March 2022. Here is the survey showing the clear boundary line between my property and yours. And here is the Colorado statute explaining that HOAs cannot annex properties without consent. I spread the documents on the table. Linda picked up my deed and examined it, her expression shifting to concern. Todd leaned over to look as well. Frank stopped typing and watched the exchange. Karen, however, did not pick up any of the papers. Mr. Crawford, paperwork can be amended. When we expanded our community boundaries last year, we included your property for the benefit of everyone. You have access to our community center, our maintained roads up to your entrance, and the security of being part of a well-managed neighborhood. I do not want access to your community center. I maintain my own driveway, and I specifically purchased my property to avoid being part of a managed neighborhood. But there is a bigger issue here, Karen. I am not just a neighbor. I am your water supplier. That got the attention of everyone in the room. Several homeowners who had been half paying attention suddenly looked up. Todd's eyes widened. Frank stopped pretending to work on his laptop. I continued. In 2022, your developers purchased a water easement from me because the county would not approve a well on your property. I agreed to supply water from my well to your homes under a detailed contract that includes a termination clause. Specifically, I can revoke the easement with 90 days written notice if you attempt to assert HOA jurisdiction over my property. By filing this lien, you have triggered that clause. Karen's face was turning red. You cannot hold our water hostage over a disagreement about dues. It is not a disagreement. It is a fact. I do not owe you money because I am not part of your HOA, and I am not holding anything hostage. I am explaining that your actions have legal consequences under our existing contract. If you remove the lien immediately and provide written acknowledgement that my property is independent, we can continue as we have been. If you do not, I will exercise my contractual right to terminate water service." An older man in the third row stood up. "Hold on, are you saying our water comes from his property?" Todd nodded slowly. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell. The development well draws from an easement on Mr. Crawford's land. It was all disclosed in the purchase documents when you bought your home." "I do not remember reading anything about that." "Does that mean he can actually shut off our water?" "Legally, yes," I said. "But I do not want to. I just want this illegal lien removed." Karen banged her gavel. "Mr. Crawford, this is not the forum for threats. We will take your documents under advisement and consult with our attorney. The board will respond in due course through proper channels. When we have had time to review everything." "That is not good enough. You filed this lien without reviewing anything. You owe me the same urgency in removing it." "Sir, you need to understand that we have procedures and processes. We cannot just reverse a lien because you show up with some papers and make threats about water." I felt my patience evaporating. "These are not some papers. This is legal proof that you have made a mistake. And pointing out the consequences of your mistake is not a threat. It is information you need to make an informed decision." Another homeowner, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes, spoke up. "Karen, if there is even a chance he is right, should not we fix this immediately?" "I have 2 kids and a baby. We cannot be without water." Karen's voice was sharp. "Emily, please. The board is handling this. Mr. Crawford, your 5 minutes are up. We will be in touch. I need something in writing tonight confirming you will remove the lien." "That is not how this works. This meeting is about HOA business, and you are not a member as you keep insisting. So if you have said your piece, you can leave." I gathered my documents, looked at the homeowners who were now whispering anxiously among themselves, and made a decision. "Fine. Consider this your formal notice. I am invoking the termination clause in our water agreement. You have 90 days from today, which is October 21st, so your water service ends on January 19th, 2026, unless this lien is removed and I receive written confirmation that you will not attempt to include my property in your HOA again." The room erupted. Multiple people started talking at once. Someone shouted that they needed to fix this immediately. Another person demanded to know why they were never told the water situation was contingent. Emily, the woman with kids, looked like she was about to cry. Karen banged the gavel repeatedly. "Everyone calm down. Mr. Crawford is attempting to extort this community, and we will not negotiate with threats. This meeting is adjourned." "It is not extortion, it is a contract," I said, but she was already gathering her papers and walking toward a back office. Todd and Linda followed her, while Frank stayed behind and was immediately swarmed by angry homeowners. I left the community center and drove home, my hands shaking slightly on the wheel. I had never done anything like that before. Confrontation made me deeply uncomfortable, but they had left me no choice. As soon as I got back to my cabin, I sat down and drafted a formal written notice of termination, citing the specific clause in the water agreement and attaching a copy of the lien as evidence of interference. I sent it via certified mail to the HOA board, their management company Premier Community Solutions, and their registered agent. Then I emailed copies to all the same parties and copied Jennifer Blackstone. She called me within an hour. "Well, you certainly do not mess around. This is going to get their attention." They did not leave me much choice. Karen basically told me to get lost and wait for them to maybe do something eventually. HOA boards attract a certain type of person sometimes. People who feel powerless in their daily lives and compensate by wielding petty authority over their neighbors. But now you have involved water rights, and that brings in insurance companies and real legal exposure. I would expect a response within a few days, maybe sooner." She was right. The next morning, I received a call from a lawyer named Patricia Mills with a Denver firm called Hartman and Associates. She was professional but tense. "Mr. Crawford, I represent the Cedar Ridge HOA. I understand there has been a dispute regarding a lien and water service. I have reviewed the documents you provided, and I need to be frank with you. The lien was filed in error. Your property is not part of the HOA, and someone in the management company made a significant mistake. We are prepared to remove the lien immediately and provide you with written confirmation of your property's independent status. In exchange, we need you to withdraw your termination notice for the water service." I leaned back in my chair. "Miss Mills, I appreciate you acknowledging the error. But I need more than just the lien removed. I need assurance this will not happen again." Someone on that board, specifically Karen Donnelly, seemed very committed to the idea that they had authority over my property even after I showed proof they do not. I need something stronger than a letter. "What are you proposing?" "An amended water agreement that includes substantial penalties if they attempt to assert HOA authority over me again. And I want the HOA to reimburse my legal fees for having to deal with this." "How much are we talking about?" $5,000 for my attorney's time, plus a penalty clause that if they ever attempt to include my property in HOA jurisdiction again, they pay me $50,000, and I can immediately terminate water service without the 90-day notice period. There was silence on the line. Then Patricia spoke carefully. "That is a significant penalty. It is a significant problem. They filed a lien against my property without doing basic research. That goes on my credit report, affects my ability to refinance or sell, and causes me real harm. And Karen made it clear she thinks they have the right to do this. I need deterrence, not just an apology. Let me discuss this with the board and get back to you. But Mr. Crawford, if we agree to this, you need to withdraw the termination notice immediately. Some of the homeowners are already panicking, and this could get out of hand quickly. I will withdraw it as soon as I have a signed agreement and confirmation the lien has been removed from county records. I will be in touch soon." She hung up, and I spent the rest of the day working on a consulting project, trying to distract myself from constantly checking email. Around 4 in the afternoon, my satellite internet pinged with a new message. It was from Patricia Mills with an attached document. The email said the board had agreed to my terms, minus the $50,000 penalty. They countered with $25,000 and immediate termination rights without notice if they interfered again. They would also pay the $5,000 in legal fees and provide a written statement to the county clarifying that my property was not part of the HOA. The lien would be removed within 48 hours. I called Jennifer and read her the proposal. She laughed. "Take it. $25,000 is more than enough to make them think twice, and you got everything else you wanted. This is a complete victory." I emailed Patricia my acceptance and spent that evening drafting a withdrawal of my termination notice, contingent on receiving the signed agreement and confirmation of the lien removal. By Friday afternoon, everything was finalized. The amended water agreement was signed by all parties. The $5,000 was wired to my account, and I received an official letter from Boulder County confirming the lien had been removed and was being marked as filed in error. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, on a cold November morning, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my door. I pulled on a jacket and opened it to find Karen Donnelly standing on my porch with two men in work vests behind her. One of them was holding a clipboard. "Mr. Crawford, we need access to your well equipment for an inspection." I blinked, still half asleep. "What are you talking about? We have hired an independent water consultant to evaluate the system and ensure it meets state safety standards. Per our agreement, we have the right to verify that the water supply is safe and adequate." I held up a hand. "First of all, you do not have the right to show up unannounced and demand access to my property. Second, our agreement specifies that any inspections must be scheduled with reasonable notice and conducted by a mutually agreed upon third party." "Who are these people?" The man with the clipboard stepped forward. "I am Dale Freeman with Mountain Water Solutions. Miss Donnelly hired us to do a comprehensive assessment of your well system, including flow rates, water quality, and infrastructure condition. Do you have credentials?" He handed me a business card. I looked it up on my phone while they waited. Mountain Water Solutions was a real company out of Fort Collins, but their primary business seemed to be water treatment systems and selling filtration equipment. "This looks like a sales company, not an independent testing lab. And Karen, our agreement says mutual selection. You cannot just hire someone and show up." Karen crossed her arms. "The agreement says we can verify water quality. Our residents have a right to know what they are drinking. Your residents have been drinking this water for 3 years without issues. This is harassment." "No, this is due diligence. Now are you going to let us inspect the system or not?" "Not without proper notice and a genuinely independent inspector. And definitely not with you standing here trying to bully your way onto my property. Leave, or I am calling the sheriff." Dale held up his hands. "Look, I do not want any trouble. Madam, maybe we should reschedule this properly." Karen glared at him, then at me. "Fine. But we will be back with proper notice, and if you refuse access then you will be in breach of contract." They left, and I immediately called Patricia Mills. She sighed heavily when I explained what had happened. "I will send Karen a very stern email reminding her that the agreement requires good faith cooperation and mutual consent. She is obviously still bitter about the outcome and looking for ways to create problems. Document everything. If she keeps harassing you, we may need to seek a restraining order." Over the next month, Karen tried 3 more times to schedule inspections, each time proposing vendors that were clearly not independent testing labs. I rejected all of them and proposed a certified lab used by the state health department. She ignored my suggestion. Meanwhile, I noticed that my quarterly water payment was late again. When I emailed the HOA management company, they claimed there was a dispute about the usage calculations, and they were having it audited. By mid-December, I was exhausted. Every interaction with Cedar Ridge HOA was an argument. Karen seemed determined to make my life difficult, and the rest of the board either did not care or was too intimidated by her to intervene. I started seriously considering just terminating the water agreement and letting them deal with the fallout. The contract required them to pay me regardless of disputes, and their refusal was a material breach. Then something happened that changed everything. On December 18th, I received a frantic call from Emily, the young mother who had spoken up at the board meeting. Her voice was shaking. "Mr. Crawford, I am so sorry to bother you, but I did not know who else to call. Karen is telling everyone that you are going to shut off our water on Christmas Eve as some kind of revenge, and people are panicking. Some families are talking about moving out. Is that true?" "What?" "No, that is completely false. I withdrew the termination notice months ago after we reached an agreement." "Oh, thank God." Karen showed people an email at the last board meeting that she said was from you, threatening to cut off water during the holidays. She said you were retaliating because she had asked for a safety inspection. My stomach dropped. Emily, I never sent any such email. When was this meeting? Last Tuesday. She said you had been difficult and unreasonable, and she was trying to protect the community, but you were making it impossible. That is a lie. She has been the one harassing me and violating our agreement. Listen, can you do me a favor? Can you get me a copy of whatever email she showed people? I will try. I know Linda seemed uncomfortable with the whole thing. Maybe I can ask her. Emily called back 2 hours later. Linda had sent her a screenshot, which Emily forwarded to me. The email appeared to come from my address and was dated December 10th. It said that due to continued interference and breach of contract by the HOA, I was terminating water service effective December 24th, and that they should make alternative arrangements immediately. The tone was hostile and aggressive, nothing like how I actually write. The problem was I never sent it. I checked my email logs, my sent folder, everything. That message did not exist in my records. Someone had faked it. I called Jennifer Blackstone immediately, even though it was evening. She listened to the situation and her voice went cold. Ethan, this is fraud. If Karen fabricated an email to slander you and create panic, that is a serious legal issue. We need to act fast because if people start abandoning their homes or property values drop, she could claim enormous damages and try to blame you. First, send me that screenshot. Second, I want you to send a formal email to the entire HOA board and their attorney stating unequivocally that the email is fake. You are honoring the agreement and water service is not being terminated. Copy me on it. Third, we are filing a police report. I did exactly what she said. I drafted a detailed email explaining that I had never sent the December 10th message, that it was fabricated, and that I was considering legal action for defamation and fraud. I attached my email server logs showing no such message in my sent history. I sent it to Patricia Mills, all 4 board members, and the management company Premier Community Solutions. Patricia called me within 30 minutes. Mr. Crawford, I just saw your email. This is extremely concerning. I am not representing Karen in her personal capacity, only the HOA as an entity, but I need to tell you that if she did what you are alleging, the HOA will not protect her. We take fraud very seriously. I want a full board meeting with all the homeowners present where the truth comes out. And I want Karen removed from the board. I cannot promise the second part, that is up to the homeowners, but I will make sure there is a meeting, and I will recommend the board issue a formal statement clarifying the situation. The meeting was scheduled for December 22nd at 7 in the evening. Jennifer came with me this time, and the community center was packed. Every single homeowner seemed to be there, and the mood was tense. Karen sat at the board table looking defiant, while Todd, Linda, and Frank all looked miserable. Todd opened the meeting. Thank you all for coming on short notice. We are here to address some serious concerns that have arisen regarding communication between the board and Mr. Ethan Crawford, who supplies water to our community. There have been allegations of a fabricated email, and we need to get to the bottom of this. Mr. Crawford, would you like to present your case? I stood up, and Jennifer stood with me. She spoke first. My name is Jennifer Blackstone, and I am Mr. Crawford's attorney. We are here because Karen Donnelly presented to this community a fraudulent email purporting to be from my client, threatening to shut off your water on Christmas Eve. That email does not exist in Mr. Crawford's server logs, was never sent by him, and appears to have been fabricated to defame him and create panic. This is not a minor issue. This is potential criminal fraud. The room erupted in angry voices. Several people started shouting at Karen, demanding to know if it was true. One man stood up and said his wife had been having panic attacks because they had a newborn and thought they would have no water. Karen stood up, her face flushed. I did not fabricate anything. I received that email, and I shared it with the board because people needed to know what we were dealing with. Jennifer pulled out a folder. Then you will be able to provide the original email with full headers showing it came from Mr. Crawford's actual email server, correct? I deleted it after forwarding it to the board. It was upsetting, and I did not want to keep looking at it. How convenient. Linda, Todd, Frank, did any of you receive a forwarded copy from Karen? Linda shook her head. Frank said, she showed us a screenshot at the board meeting, but I never got the actual email. Todd looked at Karen. Karen, did you forward the email to any of us? I do not remember. It was a stressful time. Jennifer's voice was ice. Miss Donnelly, I have a forensic IT specialist on standby who can examine your devices and email accounts to verify whether you ever received such an email. Are you willing to allow that examination? Karen's eyes darted around the room. You cannot just demand to search my personal property. Then we will pursue this through law enforcement and the courts. Mr. Crawford filed a police report this afternoon with the Boulder County Sheriff. Fabricating communications to defame someone and manipulate a community is a crime. If you cooperated and this was a genuine misunderstanding, it could be resolved quickly. If you refuse, it looks like you are hiding something. The room was silent except for the sound of the ventilation system. Finally, an older woman in the front row stood up. Karen, just tell us the truth. Did you make up that email? Karen's composure cracked. Her voice rose. Everything I have done has been to protect this community. He has been holding us hostage from day one with his water threats. He demanded money from us, humiliated me in front of everyone, and acted like he was better than all of us just because he was here first. I was trying to show people what kind of person we are dealing with. So you did fabricate it, Jennifer said quietly. I paraphrased what he said at the board meeting. He threatened to shut off our water, and I was reminding people of that fact. He threatened it in October, then withdrew that threat after reaching an agreement. You created a fake email dated December 10th claiming he was cutting off water on Christmas Eve. That is not paraphrasing. That is fabrication and fraud. Todd stood up. Karen, I think you need to resign from the board effective immediately. You cannot force me to resign. I am an elected member, and only the homeowners can remove me. The older woman spoke again. Then I call for an emergency vote to remove Karen Donnelly from the board for misconduct. Do I have a second? 5 hands went up simultaneously. Within 15 minutes, a vote was held. Karen was removed from the board by a margin of 27-3. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the community center, slamming the door behind her. The relief in the room was palpable. Emily came up to me afterward with tears in her eyes. Thank you for setting the record straight. I was so scared, and I should have trusted my instincts that something was wrong. It is not your fault. Karen was very convincing. Todd approached and extended his hand. Mr. Crawford, on behalf of the board, I apologize for everything you have been put through. We should have stopped this months ago. Is there anything we can do to make this right? Just honor the agreement and pay me on time. That is all I ever wanted. Over the next few weeks, things finally calmed down. Karen moved out of Cedar Ridge in January, selling her house quickly and leaving the state according to neighborhood gossip. The HOA elected a new president, a retired school teacher named Margaret who actually read contracts before making decisions. They paid all the overdue water fees with interest and apologized in writing. The police investigation into the fake email was eventually closed because Karen had moved, and the DA decided it was not worth pursuing across state lines for what they considered a civil dispute. Jennifer and I discussed suing her for defamation, but honestly, I was exhausted and just wanted to move on with my life. By spring of 2026, Cedar Ridge and I had a functional, even friendly relationship. They invited me to their community events, which I politely declined, but I appreciated the gesture. The water system ran smoothly, payments arrived on time, and nobody tried to claim my property was part of their HOA. I installed a small plaque near my well pump, with the date I drilled it, just as a reminder to myself and anyone who might come after that this water source predated everything around it. It felt important to mark that history, to have physical proof that I was here first and had every right to protect what was mine. The whole experience taught me some hard lessons about HOAs and the kind of people who seek power in them. Most of the Cedar Ridge residents were good people who just wanted a nice place to live and raise their families. But it only takes one person, one Karen Donnelly with a need for control and a willingness to bend the truth, to turn a community into a nightmare. I also learned that having leverage is not the same as wanting to use it. I never actually wanted to shut off anyone's water. The thought of families without running water, especially with young kids, made me sick. But having that option, having the legal right to protect my property and myself, made all the difference when dealing with someone who thought they could bully me into submission. These days, I spend most of my time working from the cabin, taking consulting jobs when they interest me, and otherwise enjoying the quiet mountain life I always wanted. I can see some of the Cedar Ridge rooftops through the trees when the leaves are down, but mostly it feels like I am alone up here with the forest and the creek and the sky. Every quarter when the water payment arrives, I think about how close I came to shutting the whole system down and walking away. It would have been financially painful for me and devastating for them, and all because someone could not admit they made a mistake. Pride and ego almost turned a simple clerical error into a disaster that would have harmed 30 families, but we found a way through it, and maybe that is the real lesson. Even when people do stupid, harmful things, even when they lie and manipulate and make your life hell for months, sometimes you can still reach a resolution that lets everyone move forward. Not because they deserve it necessarily, but because choosing the destructive path hurts everyone, including yourself. I still have the termination clause in my contract, still have the right to shut off the water with 90 days' notice if they interfere with my property again. That clause will be there for as long as the agreement exists, an insurance policy against future Karens who might decide they know better than property law and contracts. But I do not think about it much anymore. The new board is competent and respectful. Margaret even sent me a fruit basket at Christmas, which was thoughtful if unnecessary. Life in the mountains is peaceful again, which is all I ever wanted in the first place. Sometimes when I am sitting on my porch in the evening, I hear kids playing in the Cedar Ridge neighborhood, their voices carrying through the trees. I think about Emily's children, and all the other families who depend on the well I drilled 8 years ago when this was all just empty forest and possibility. It is strange to think that something as simple as water, something people take for granted until they do not have it, became the center of such a complicated mess. The well pump runs quietly in my basement, 15 gallons per minute flowing through pipes that connect my property to theirs, a physical link between separate worlds. I check the system monthly, making sure everything is functioning properly, because whatever our legal arrangement says, I do not want anyone to suffer because of equipment failure or negligence on my part. That sense of responsibility is something I did not fully appreciate when I signed the original water agreement back in 2022. I thought it was just a business transaction, a way to make some money off an abundant resource I was not fully utilizing. But it became much more than that. It became a relationship, complicated and occasionally antagonistic, but ultimately one that required trust and mutual dependence. Karen never understood that. She saw everything as a zero-sum game where someone had to win and someone had to lose, where admitting a mistake meant showing weakness, where negotiation was the same as surrender. That mindset nearly destroyed the community she claimed to be protecting. In the end, the lien that started all of this was removed from county records, marked as filed in error, and disappeared like it never existed. But the experience of fighting it, of standing up for my rights against people who thought they could steamroll me with bureaucratic authority, changed something in me. I am less willing to let things slide now, less inclined to avoid confrontation for the sake of peace. Maybe that is growth, or maybe it is just being tired of people who mistake kindness for weakness. Either way, I know my boundaries now, and I know how to defend them. The mountains taught me solitude, but Cedar Ridge HOA taught me strength. I never wanted to be anyone's adversary. I bought my cabin to escape the politics and power games of the city, to live simply and quietly in a place where the only sounds are wind through pines and water running over rocks. But when you own something other people need, you cannot fully escape the world and its complications. You become connected whether you want to be or not. So I maintain the well, monitor the water quality, keep the system running efficiently, and cash the quarterly checks. And I keep every document, every email, every piece of evidence of our agreement locked in a fireproof safe in my cabin. Because I learned the hard way that good fences make good neighbors, but good documentation makes even better protection. The cabin is paid off, the water system works perfectly, and my life has returned to the peaceful rhythm I wanted. I wake up when the sun hits my bedroom window, work on projects that interest me, hike in the afternoons, and read in the evenings. It is a simple existence, maybe even boring to some people, but it is mine and nobody can take it from me by filing a fraudulent lien or making up threatening emails. That security, that knowledge that I defended what was mine and won, is worth more than any amount of money. It is the feeling of standing on my porch, looking out at 12 acres of forest and mountain sky, and knowing that this land is mine free and clear, with no HOA telling me what color to paint my shutters or how tall my grass can grow. Sometimes freedom is not about going anywhere or doing anything dramatic. Sometimes it is just about being left alone to live your life on your own terms, in a place you chose, by rules that make sense to you. That is what I fought for when Cedar Ridge HOA tried to absorb my property into their jurisdiction, and that is what I won. The well keeps pumping, the water keeps flowing, and life goes on in the mountains outside Boulder, Colorado. 30 families have water for their homes, and I have peace and autonomy on my land. In the end, despite all the conflict and stress and anger, we found a way to coexist that works for everyone. And if another Karen ever joins the board and decides to test those boundaries again, well, I still have that termination clause waiting in the contract like a loaded gun nobody wants fired. Mutual assured destruction is not the prettiest basis for a relationship, but sometimes it is the only thing that keeps people honest. I hope it never comes to that again. I really do. Because despite everything, I would rather be the guy who supplies water to his neighbors than the guy who cuts it off. I would rather be known for helping than for harming, even when the people I am helping do not always deserve it. But I will never again let someone push me around just because they have a title and a gavel and an inflated sense of their own authority. That lesson was a hard one, and I will not forget it. My property, my rights, my water, my rules. That is the deal. Take it or leave it. And if you try to change the terms without my consent, you will find out very quickly that the quiet guy in the cabin on the hill has more leverage than you ever imagined. The snow is falling outside my window now as I write this, covering the forest in white silence. Down the mountain, Cedar Ridge homes have their lights on, warm and safe with running water for showers and dishes and everything else modern life requires. And up here in my cabin, I have the same thing, drawn from the same aquifer by the same pump, independent yet connected. It is a strange kind of poetry, this arrangement we have. But it works, and after everything we went through to reach this point, I am grateful for that simple fact. It works, and everyone gets what they need, and nobody has to fight anymore. That is not such a bad ending after all.